Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair, and to the penultimate week of Classic Novel Month 5. So this week I'm stretching the definition of the word classic, and that's deliberate. With Classic Novel Month, I've tended to be very safe about it, picking either books that I have read or books that I feel like I should have read. Last year, I finally tried to veer out of my comfort zone with The Hunt for Red October. And that blew up in my face. So I tried it again this year, but I picked something that was at least a bit shorter, so it would be an easier read if it got really boring. Thankfully it didn't, and that's why it's the third week's novel and not the last week's. Anyway, yeah, Fight Club. Fight Club is an interesting animal. It began as a short story, which was expanded into a full novel, but not in the usual way of short story to full novel. It didn't expand on an entire story. The original short story, in its entirety, exists within Fight Club as Chapter 6. There's also an interesting similarity between this book and the first book we looked at this month, Benjamin Button. Both the film adaptations of that novel and Fight Club were both directed by David Fincher, albeit almost a decade apart. Anyway, let's see if Fight Club is truly worthy of the moniker of classic. This is Fight Club. Cover is, oh good lord, this cover sucks. I know it's the movie poster, but it's a crappy movie poster as well. I mean, this is just garbage. It's so boring. And having Tyler and the narrator on the cover is great. But why doesn't the font have any sort of outlining on it when it reaches over the black background onto the pictures? That's just weird. Other than that, the logo is alright. It's soap, which is part of the story because at one point Tyler Durden makes soap out of another character's mother. It's not as weird as it sounds. It was the result of the mother going through liposuction and got her fat sucked out, which in turn was used to create soap. Actually, now that I think about it, that's still weird. Regardless, I really hate this cover. It's the two things I despise most about book covers. Movie tie-in covers and crappy art design. Let's get to the book. The story revolves around our unnamed narrator who is suffering from insomnia and so goes to support groups for various illnesses at his doctor's suggestion to see what real suffering is to help him sleep. And it seems to work as the narrator gets relief after being embraced by one of the members of the group, Bob, who had testicular cancer due to steroid use and then as a result developed gynecomastia, which gave him breasts, which allows the narrator to cry, which cures the insomnia. That is, until two teenagers meet and start falling in love. And the boy is really pretentious with his put the killing thing between the teeth mantra. However, eventually a woman named Marla starts attending the meetings under the same pretenses that he does, and he becomes uneasy by her presence, and his insomnia returns, since she reminds him that he doesn't belong at the meetings. On a business trip, he meets a man by the name of Tyler Durden, who is a movie theater projectionist who spends his time while working editing in frames of genitalia into all the movies at his theater. You know, that would lay the frame for a crossover between midnight screenings and the Cinema Snob. The narrator returns home, but as he does, he finds his apartment has been destroyed. And I don't mean like ransacked or someone went in and broke stuff. The place exploded. He ends up moving in with Tyler, and after a suicide attempt by Marla, Tyler starts sleeping with her, much to the narrator's annoyance. The narrator also agreed to Tyler's stipulation that in order to move in with him, he had to hit Tyler as hard as he can. He does so, and they get into a fist fight, leading to the creation of the titular Fight Club.
He said it! He said it!
The idea is to get a bunch of guys together who are angry at the world and let them work out their aggressions. Fight Club continues as the narrator's life starts to fall apart. He comes into work perpetually in a state of looking like he got the crap beat out of him, which he did, and he starts to get more and more annoyed with his boss and his job and all the things associated with him. Fight Club, meanwhile, evolves into Project Mayhem.
Whoopsies. Football. I choose football. Red.
I would say not that one, but honestly, that's sort of what they do, just on a much more graphic level. Project Mayhem is what Tyler uses to fight back against the 1%, pulling extremely elaborate terrorist attacks, which the narrator is not really on board with. And that's how the story goes. The narrator and Tyler and Project Mayhem, as the pranks get more and more elaborate and start hurting more and more people, as the narrator is helpless to stop what Tyler has created. Eventually, the narrator decides that enough is enough and wants to end it, after Project Mayhem's antics end up killing Bob from the support group. But Tyler isn't going to let that happen, especially since Tyler is the narrator. Turns out that insomnia he had was actually a split personality, and everyone he knows, save for his co-workers, knew him as Tyler Durden. And that relationship that the narrator hated that Marla and Tyler had was his own relationship with her. Durden has the Mayhem goons take him up to the roof of a skyscraper because Durden wants to die as a martyr for his cause. And well, if he dies, so does the narrator. Tyler holds a gun to his head, and then Marla and the support group show up to talk him out of it. They do, and the narrator ends up in a psychiatric hospital, which he believes is heaven, recovering with Marla writing him letters until he gets better. The novel ends with the narrator discovering that some of the Mayhem goons are working in the hospital, and they tell him that everything is going according to plan. All of the characters are horrible, but that's sort of the point. Fight Club is a satirical novel, much in the same vein as Catch-22 or American Psycho. The narrator's entire deal is a subconscious dissatisfaction with the way the world works, despite the fact that he's a slave to the values that Tyler Durden fights back against. One of the parts I didn't touch on, since it wasn't important to the plot summary, was Tyler working as a waiter at an upscale hotel that frankly reminded me of the Sedgwick Hotel from Ghostbusters, and caters to parties for rich folks, and as a protest against them, he peed in their soup. In a way, the novel is showing that in the mid-90s, the American dream of the post-World War II era was gone, replaced by a capitalist, consumerist world where the rich got richer and the poor are left to starve and die. Now, why does that sound familiar? Tyler Durden is basically Robin Hood, although a lot less bantery and less rob the rich and more destroy the rich in various disturbing ways. There's even more shades of the consumerism when the narrator's apartment gets destroyed, and he methodically goes over every item of furniture that he owns and what happened to them. Marla is... well, I don't really know. As the sole female character in this novel, she doesn't really have much going for her. I mean, she's there and she does stuff, but she doesn't have to be Marla Singer. For example, she goes to the meetings for the same reason as the narrator, but we never really find out why. She hates herself and that she's alive, but we never get a reasoning for it, so it makes it hard to get invested in her. And then we have Project Mayhem and the Space Monkeys. They're Tyler's lackeys and do his bidding, the irony being that they were mindless automatons working for the man, and now do the exact same thing, but instead of getting paid for it, they get to work under the legendary Tyler Durden. So I guess that is kind of a step up. We'll be right back with more of the show. And did you know that Fight Club was inspired by a real-life fight that Polinick had while camping? I'll tell you how after the break. We're back, and Polinick went camping with a few friends and got into a brawl with other campers over the volume of their radio. But when he returned to work the following week, none of his co-workers acknowledged his smashed-up face, inspiring the first rule of Fight Club. Like last week, I'd like to start by talking about how the huge punch of the twist that Tyler Durden and the narrator are the same person is lost because of how known it is in the pop culture lexicon. It's like the three biggest spoiled twists are Planet of the Apes, The Sixth Sense, and Fight Club. The whole point of Tyler and the narrator being the same person is that we have the realization that our narrator, who seems to be against Tyler's more anarchist streak, is actually Tyler himself, and that anarchist streak is something that's buried deep within him. Knowing that going in just cheapens it. I mean, yes, the message is still there, but it's just there. I don't read the book going, wow, Tyler is the narrator? That makes me rethink all my views on the story and its messages. I read it going, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Normally, I think that spoilers enhance a story, and for the most part, they do in my book. But for something like this, where the twist is central to the themes and motifs, it just doesn't work. And I know I can't hold that against the book, but it hampered my enjoyment. The action is great. It's confusing as all hell because of the narrator being an unreliable narrator, but it's not boring, I'll tell you that. I mean, I was super lost until a friend who had read the book explained to me what was going on, and this was when I was a chapter in. Obviously, the action is informed by the characters, so everything makes logical sense based on what we know about the characters. And even after the twist, all of Tyler's actions make sense, because we never really see anyone interact with the both of them. It's always one or the other, so the twist wasn't spoiled too early by the book itself. I never wanted to put the book down. It wasn't like edge of my seat excitement, but I was invested in it and where the story was going. Frankly, I'm not a huge fan. I hesitate to call it bad because it's written fairly well, but it's not my scene. The message is great, but I didn't enjoy it. It doesn't fall back on cliches or anything bad like that, and I can see why people would like it. It's rather brilliant. It's just not for me. The characters and action and all that are great, but I'm not a fan of the more graphic stuff, and I hate things with an insurmountable death toll, and believe me, this book has a death toll almost on par with a Game of Thrones book, with all of Mayhem's antics.
I'm the world's worst cleaning lady. I'm a wild deer. If you've got cut rate insurance, you could be on the hook for thousands.
If I had to recommend it, I'd say that if you like dark graphic stuff with a message that makes you think, not only about the state of the world when it was written, but also the state of the world now, this might be something that you'd be into. If you're like me and don't like the graphic stuff, maybe give this book a pass. And that was Fight Club. Was it bad? No, it's not bad, but I personally didn't like it. Like I said, it's not written poorly, and I've seen a hell of a lot worse on this show, but I didn't really enjoy it. Like I said, if the twist hadn't been spoiled, it would have been a great book. It would have given it the little something extra that I would have needed to look past the graphic stuff and maybe give it a reread to see where the foreshadowing is, but as it stands, it's an alright novel. Is it a classic? I wouldn't add it to my personal library of classics, but I can definitely see, with all its anti-establishment, anti-consumerism views that are still relevant even today, why people would. It's definitely a revolutionary book, though one whose message is diluted thanks to the main draw of the book being ruined by pop culture. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of the Literary Lair, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you have any comments or complaints about the video, you can put those in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, show it to your friends and share it around the internet. And maybe consider supporting the show on Patreon. Next week, call me Ishmael. See you next time.